Have you ever noticed how avoidants usually pull back, keep distance, and run the other way when things get too close? But strangely enough, there are moments when they stop running and actually chase. It's confusing, it's frustrating, but it's also very telling. Because what makes them chase isn't random. It happens when a very specific set of emotional needs they don't want to admit to, suddenly collide. And when that happens, everything changes. There is a constant tug of war that lives inside the mind of someone who identifies as avoidant, a battle between the desire for independence and the forbidden craving for closeness. On one side, there is the part of them that insists on freedom, the part that tells them they do not need anyone, the part that builds walls so high that even genuine affection struggles to climb over. On the other side sits the deeply human need to connect, to feel seen, to be understood and accepted without condition. This contradiction creates an inner storm that most people around them never see, because the avoidant has mastered the art of hiding it behind calm detachment and cool distance. When an avoidant leans on their independence, they feel in control, safe, untouchable. They convince themselves that depending on others only leads to disappointment or loss, that needing someone is the first step to being hurt. They thrive on routines that protect them from vulnerability, choosing solitude when emotions feel overwhelming. Yet in the quiet moments when the distractions fade and the noise of life settles down, there is a whisper inside them that longs for warmth. That whisper is the craving for intimacy they try to silence, but it never goes away. It only grows stronger in contrast to the isolation they choose. This conflict shows up in relationships in ways that can feel almost impossible for a partner to understand. One moment, the avoidant appears present, even affectionate, allowing a glimpse of their softer side, and in the next, they withdraw as if they never wanted closeness at all. This push and pull is not random. It is the lived experience of someone torn between two powerful needs. Independence feels safe but lonely. Connection feels fulfilling but dangerous. Each side holds consequences they fear, so they oscillate back and forth, leaving those who love them caught in confusion. The truth is, both desires are real, and both exist within them at the same time. The craving for connection is not something an avoidant can truly escape because it is wired into the human experience. No matter how much someone values freedom, no one is built to live entirely without love, support, or belonging. That hunger often comes out in subtle ways, in the late-night thoughts when they wish they had someone's hand to hold, in the quiet jealousy when they see others experiencing the kind of bond they deny themselves, in the guilt they feel after pushing someone away who cared deeply for them. These are the moments where independence collides with need, and where the mask of self-sufficiency begins to slip. What makes this collision so powerful is that both sides of the conflict are equally compelling. Independence represents survival, a lifetime of learning that closeness can hurt, while connection represents the most natural form of fulfillment, a reminder that life is richer when shared. When these two forces clash, the avoidant finds themselves in turmoil, wanting to move closer but fearing the consequences, needing space but resenting the emptiness it brings. To the outside world, it may look like indecision, but inside it feels like walking a tightrope between two impossible choices. This is the space where avoidance transforms into chasing, because the longing becomes too strong to ignore. It is in this forbidden overlap that avoidants sometimes surprise even themselves. When the craving for intimacy outweighs the comfort of solitude, they step outside of their own pattern, reaching for connection even though it terrifies them. The act of chasing is not born from a sudden change of character, but from the unbearable tension between two needs colliding at full force. Independence tells them they must run, yet connection pulls them back with equal strength, and for once, the pull wins. This is the hidden engine behind their behavior, the unseen struggle that drives their moments of pursuit, the secret truth that makes them chase only when independence and longing can no longer coexist in silence. Deep within the avoidant lies a desire they rarely admit, the need to feel chosen above anyone else. On the surface, they often project indifference, convincing themselves and others that they do not care about being picked, that they are above the vulnerability of needing to be special to someone. Yet beneath the armor of detachment, this desire pulses constantly, because the truth is, everyone craves the validation that comes from knowing they are not just an option, but the one who holds a unique place in someone's life. The contradiction is that while they run from commitment, they still long for that deep recognition. This hidden need shows itself in subtle and sometimes confusing ways. An avoidant may pull away when conversations turn toward exclusivity, yet they become unsettled when they sense they could be replaced. They may resist labels or future planning, but they grow uneasy when they suspect that the person they have been keeping at arm's length could move on to someone else. It is not that they dislike the idea of being valued, it is that the weight of being chosen feels threatening, because it carries expectations, responsibilities, and the risk of letting someone down. Still, the craving to be singled out remains powerful even when it conflicts with their fear. The desire to be chosen runs so deep because it ties to self-worth. When someone feels chosen, they feel irreplaceable. And for the avoidant who struggles with intimacy, this represents both a dream and a danger. It is a dream because it reassures them that they are significant in a world where they try to convince themselves they do not need significance. And it is a danger because once chosen, they feel exposed, accountable, and vulnerable to disappointment. This paradox keeps them trapped between pushing love away and secretly wishing it would wrap around them without condition. There are moments where the fear of commitment grows louder and they retreat to protect themselves, but the forbidden need to feel chosen waits quietly in the background. It emerges when they witness others being cherished, when they remember times they felt important to someone, or when they realize the person in front of them could give their attention elsewhere. The realization that they might not be the one can shake the avoidant more deeply than they let on, creating a collision between what they say they want and what they actually need. The tension of that collision drives behaviors that often confuse their partners, because the avoidant who ran from closeness now appears to chase it. To be chosen is to be validated in the most profound way, and validation is something no one is immune to. Even the person who prides themselves on being self-sufficient cannot escape the surge of emotion that comes from knowing they matter uniquely to another. For the avoidant, this creates moments where their defenses weaken, where the risk of closeness suddenly feels worth it because the alternative, being overlooked or replaced, stings far more than the fear of intimacy. It is here that they may pursue connection, even if temporarily, as a way of soothing the silent ache of not being chosen. This is why partners often find avoidance so contradictory. They resist commitment, yet they want reassurance. They fear labels, yet they want to feel prioritized. They avoid responsibility, yet they want to know that if a choice were to be made, it would be them. This contradiction is not manipulation, but an internal battle, a tug of war between survival instincts and emotional needs. When the forbidden need to be chosen collides with their fear of commitment, it pushes them into action, making them chase what they spent so long running from, not because they stopped being avoidant, but because the hunger to feel chosen became stronger than the walls they built. An avoidant often believes their greatest need is freedom, the ability to live on their own terms without the weight of obligation or the vulnerability of depending on another person. Freedom feels like safety because it means they are not trapped, not beholden, not forced to open themselves to the risk of loss or betrayal. Yet as much as they value this independence, there is a hidden pull that tugs at them constantly, the forbidden desire for emotional safety. It is the longing to have someone they can trust fully, someone who makes the world feel less heavy, someone who allows them to rest instead of always defending themselves. This creates an invisible clash between two powerful instincts. On one hand, freedom offers them control, and control is deeply tied to their sense of survival. If they rely on no one can disappoint them. If they keep a distance, no one can hurt them. This is the belief system that keeps them detached and comfortable in their space, even when it leaves them lonely. On the other hand, emotional safety whispers promises of a different kind of peace, a peace that comes not from walls, but from presence, not from distance, but from closeness. The forbidden pull lies in the fact that while they run from intimacy, their deepest healing could only ever come from it. This contradiction is what makes their behavior so difficult to read. When the craving for emotional safety rises, it unsettles the avoidant because it threatens the narrative they have built about what it means to survive. They may suddenly feel drawn toward a partner's stability, comforted by their care, soothed by their consistency, only to later panic at the thought of being dependent on it. The very thing that feels nurturing also feels dangerous, because to accept safety from someone else means giving up a piece of their freedom. To them, freedom and safety feel mutually exclusive, as though they cannot have both, and this belief keeps them trapped in cycles of approach and withdrawal. Emotional safety is powerful because it speaks directly to the wounds they try so hard to ignore. Deep down, they may long for the feeling of being able to exhale around another person, to be held without judgment, to know they are secure in someone's care. But the moment they begin to taste it, fear floods in. What if this safety is temporary? What if it disappears? What if trusting it leaves them more vulnerable than they were before? These questions turn safety into danger in their mind, and so they run back toward freedom, convincing themselves that solitude is the wiser choice, even as a part of them aches for the connection they abandoned. This inner conflict often plays out in relationships through mixed signals. They might lean into closeness, showing affection and opening up more than usual, only to pull back when it feels too real. They might express appreciation for their partner's steadiness, but later grow distant when it starts to feel like reliance. To the outside observer, this looks confusing and even contradictory, but it is the unavoidable collision between two deep needs. The forbidden pull of emotional safety is always there, but it constantly crashes against their instinct to preserve freedom at all costs. The stronger the pull becomes, the more resistance they feel, until eventually one force temporarily outweighs the other. It is in the rare moments when emotional safety wins over freedom that avoidants begin to chase. The fear of dependence fades just enough for them to recognize the value of what they could lose, and in that space, they move toward the very connection they usually resist. They do not chase because they stopped valuing freedom, but because the comfort and grounding of feeling safe with someone begins to feel more urgent than the protection of distance. This is the hidden mechanism inside them, the secret collision where the forbidden pull of emotional safety challenges the need for freedom so intensely that it flips their script, creating behavior that feels out of character but is in fact the deepest reflection of their human longing. For the avoidant, the ego plays a powerful role in shaping behavior, often louder than the emotions they try so hard to suppress. They may act indifferent as though nothing phases them, but beneath that surface is a hunger for validation that grows especially strong when they sense you could slip away. Validation is more than simple attention. It is the confirmation that they matter, that they are seen, that they still hold importance in someone's life. Even when they resist intimacy, their ego resists rejection even more. And when the possibility of losing you becomes real, that hunger ignites in ways they cannot easily ignore. It is not that the avoidant suddenly becomes someone who embraces closeness without fear, but rather that the ego refuses to allow the idea of being replaced. They may have pulled away when they felt too needed, but when they realize you are strong enough to walk without them, their perception shifts. The thought that someone else could occupy the space they left empty threatens their sense of significance. The ego cannot tolerate being forgotten or disregarded, and so it pushes them into motion, sometimes against their own avoidant patterns, because regaining validation feels more urgent than maintaining distance. This hunger shows itself in subtle but unmistakable ways. They may reappear after silence, reaching out in small but deliberate gestures to remind you of their presence. They may suddenly act more attentive, offering fragments of closeness that seem inconsistent with their usual detachment. These behaviors are not accidents. They are strategies born from the ego's fear of losing a source of validation. The avoidant who once dismissed affection now seeks it out, not because the fear of intimacy has vanished, but because the fear of invisibility has taken over. To the ego, being unseen feels like a deeper wound than being close ever could. The conflict here is that avoidants are often unaware of just how much validation drives them. They convince themselves that they are above needing reassurance, that independence shields them from such human longings, yet their actions reveal otherwise. When your absence is felt, when your attention shifts, when your energy no longer revolves around them, the quiet panic they experience is their ego starving for confirmation. They begin to realize that your presence provided more validation than they admitted, and the idea of losing it threatens the fragile balance they live in. This is why they chase when they sense you slipping, because the hunger becomes unbearable. What makes this collision so potent is that it is not about love in the traditional sense, at least not at first. It is about identity and significance, about whether they still matter enough to be chosen, remembered, desired. When that is in jeopardy, the avoidant ego rallies in ways their heart rarely does. They may reach for you not to offer depth, but to reclaim validation, to reassure themselves they are not replaceable. It is a raw, unfiltered need, and while it can appear self-centered, it is also deeply human. No one is immune to the ache of being forgotten, and for avoidants who pride themselves on self-reliance, the sting of being unimportant cuts sharper than they expect. In those moments, the chase begins, not as a conscious choice, but as a reflexive response to the fear of losing validation. They may act urgently, reaching out more than usual, showing up in ways that surprise even them, because the ego cannot tolerate silence where there used to be recognition. Their pursuit is driven less by romantic clarity and more by the desperate collision of fear and desire, the fear of being erased colliding with the desire to remain significant. This is why avoidants only chase when these hidden forces collide, when the ego's hunger for validation outweighs their need to maintain distance, creating behavior that seems inconsistent, yet reveals the deepest truth about what drives them. At the core of avoidant behavior is usually the fear of intimacy, the deep discomfort that arises when closeness feels overwhelming, exposing them to vulnerability and the possibility of being hurt. Intimacy threatens the sense of control they hold onto so tightly, and so they distance themselves, withdraw, or create barriers to protect their independence. But beneath this protective shield is another fear, one they do not often admit to, the fear of abandonment. This is the quiet voice that whispers in moments of distance, the ache that surfaces when someone they care about begins to pull away. And though the fear of intimacy often dominates, there are rare times when the fear of abandonment grows stronger, creating a powerful collision that shifts their entire behavior. When abandonment begins to feel real, when the possibility of losing someone becomes more than just an idea, the avoidant feels a kind of panic they cannot easily disguise. Their usual strategies of retreat suddenly feel less safe because distance no longer provides comfort, it highlights the emptiness. The walls they built to keep closeness out now trap them in isolation, and the reality of losing someone who matters threatens to make that isolation permanent. It is in these moments that fear of abandonment pushes harder than fear of intimacy, tipping the balance toward pursuit rather than withdrawal. This is when the avoidant who usually resists suddenly begins to chase. This collision is so rare because it requires a unique trigger. For the avoidant to move past their own resistance, they must sense that the person they have taken for granted or kept at a distance is no longer guaranteed to stay. It is not enough for them to feel loved. They must feel the potential absence, the loss of the connection they thought would always be available. Only when abandonment feels like a genuine risk does it outweigh the terror of intimacy. This realization stirs something primal within them, a need to hold on, even if holding on means confronting the very closeness they have been avoiding. The struggle is that both fears are rooted in survival. Intimacy feels like danger because it requires exposure, honesty, and trust, all things that risk pain. Abandonment feels like danger because it threatens loneliness, insignificance, and rejection, all things that remind them of wounds they have tried to bury. When these fears collide, the avoidant feels torn, pulled between two instincts that both feel unbearable. But when abandonment takes the upper hand, intimacy becomes the lesser of two threats. It is not that they stop fearing closeness, but that the possibility of being left behind feels even more terrifying. This is the rare shift that makes them reach for what they once ran from. When this shift happens, the avoidance behavior can appear almost unrecognizable. They may suddenly express vulnerability, admit to feelings, or fight for the relationship in ways they avoided before. The same person who once avoided labels or resisted affection may now cling to the connection, not because their fear of intimacy is gone, but because the fear of being abandoned has grown louder. Their actions in these moments are fueled by urgency, a desperate attempt to preserve what they realize they cannot bear to lose. To a partner, this sudden change can feel confusing, but it is simply the visible result of the rare collision between these two fears.